Okay, welcome class to today's lecture on transportation systems. And we'll be continuing on our previous lecture based upon urban transportation, in which we'll be discussing your transportation system at a city level. So today we'll be talking about transportation and land use. Now, as an urban planner, most of you might have gone through these interactions or linkages between transportation and land use. So land use and transportation interactions, it's a very strong association is seen between these two concepts, and they are influencing each other. So transportation is influencing the land use, and land use is influencing your transportation system. So we have discussed the urban form and land use, and in the future we'll be talking about urban mobility. For now, let's talk about this land use. That what is it? So we have talked about what is an urban form, right? And how different parts of the cities are linked together to form some kind of linkages. So we've also talked about spatial structures as well. Now, the main thing which comes after the spatial structure urban form is the land use. So land use is also a part which is actively influencing your transportation systems. So existence of this land use as in American studies, in American urban regional context, if you see that urban planning is very much interlinked with transportation systems, and transportation systems is an is a fundamental. I would say it's a necessary part for urban planning, especially in the urban this American discourse. So those North American planners are saying that they actively says that land use and transportation cannot be studied uh, like separately. In Pakistan, well, maybe they have upgraded the courses the bachelor's level, at least in the planning, urban planning, at bachelor's level. Land use is often taught as a very important part of your development planning. That everything is being developed or future development is planned according to the land use. We can call it zoning plan, development plan. There are different names for that, and we'll go into it later as well. But for today's lecture, we'll be very much focusing on the link or the interaction between these two concepts, the land use and the transportation system. So now let's assume that we are going to be talking about, we are going to designing a new freeway or a highway or a road. So of course, as a transportation engineer or a civil engineer, you know that you need to know about the traffic on the road, existing roads, and what would be the capacities of that road, how much would be the speed limits, what would be the level of service of it, what will be the financial budgeting for it, how much design speed should be kept for this particular road. So these are very much important, and generally it is the engineers, they are very much familiar with the engineering aspect of the transportation. Now, the main thing which comes to the mind later on is that no one gives an idea, no one have a inclination, no one plans for that, that how many buildings will be built along this particular road. Okay, what types of buildings will be built along that road? And let's say, what would be the land use will it be? Will it be an office building or will it be technology park? Okay, one more thing, because I have a non-planners as well in the class. So anyone who does not know what is land use, kindly raise your hand. Feel free. I was assuming that you know land use. So let me first recheck what is land use. Anyone? Especially engineers and architects. What does it mean by land use? Okay, an urban planner, please kindly raise your hand, urban planner, and how do you describe land use? What is land use? Saifullah, please.
सर लैंड यूज़ वो एरिया होता है जो कि पब्लिक के यूज़ में होता है एरिया, जिस तरह हमारी बिल्डिंग्स हो गई हैं, एग्रीकल्चर फार्म्स हो गए हैं, और इससे रिलेटेड बाकी जितने भी फीचर्स हैं जो पब्लिक यूज़ में होते हैं वो उसे लैंड यूज़ कहते हैं.
Okay, that's one definition from a GS perspective, and that is good enough from the GS perspective. Urban planner, how do you define land use? Planners. Bars, yes, please.
So we can define it that the distribution of land for the use of the residents, likewise the residential, commercial, public area, or roads, likewise industries, industrial area, agriculture area. इसको हम land use कहते हैं.
Okay, perfect. So basically, what Saifullah described was the built-up area in which is used by the public. And as a GS expert, I agree with him that from remote sensing perspective, we analyze that what is a built-up area, what is water bodies, what is the vegetation. So for that, we call it, as a planner, we call it a land cover or a built-up forms, urban form basically. And land cover is the word predominantly used. But for the land use, the word land use in the urban planning literature, it signifies a purpose of that particular built-up area. What is this area being used for? What is the purpose? What is the function of that area? For example, a built-up area is all over. If you see a map, you see a lot of built-up area. But what is the function of this particular small buildings? Like, is it commercial? Is it residential? Is it industrial? That is the definition of land use. So we'll be talking land use from this perspective of as well as land cover as well as land use, because land cover and land use, they are often go hand in hand together. But conceptually, land cover and land use is different. So okay, so coming back to the lecture, we were talking about the how we lay down the road networks. So if we're laying down the road networks, we need to know what would be the particular land uses along these roads. So unfortunately, as a planner or even as an engineer, we are very much lacking about prediction of what sort of land use will be built up along that road. And okay, even if as a planner, if you're designing a very good scheme or a very good city, we envision that, okay, this area will be kept residential. But what about the next 40, 50 years? What about the conversion of land use, like from maybe it will convert from residential to commercial areas, and maybe that road will encourage high-rise development. So what sort of development will be done? So those type of development of buildings and land use, that will have a significant impact on the existing road or the road design. So we need to know that even if let's say if we have given buildings residential, even if we have thought that in the future this road will be commercialized, and if some of planners might know that these development authorities, they regularly advertise that now these roads are kept now open for commercialization policy, and they can give certain fees and they can convert their land into commercial. Okay, so that area is okay. We say that okay, in the future it will be commercialized. Then we need to know what about the parking spaces over there. Is there enough parking spaces which will handle the traffic coming from this road, and will it park on the road or will the buildings itself have the parking places? That will have an impact on the road and the road traffic as well. Then let's talk about the sizes. What would be the lot sizes? How much big plazas will be there? How much will be the employment set? Let's say people are employed over there. How many people are employed over there? They would need their own parking spaces. They would need their own. That will increase the load on the road network. So sometimes we use a very crude method of traffic impact assessment. We make a building if it is in a certain it has a certain plot size and it exceeds a certain height limit, then it according to different laws of different cities, we need to have a traffic impact assessment, TIA reports. We have to do traffic impact assessment of that particular building on that road. But what about if we are going to be expanding it or planning for a new freeway, new highway, if you're developing something new? So we need to know that as an engineer or as a planner, these two needs to be integrated together. They needs to be thought out together. So unless we are integrating them together, we are thinking about both of the concepts at the same time, we won't be able to have a very good transportation system as well as land use planning. So unfortunately, land use planning and transportation planning in Pakistan context, I've seen the development plans and the zoning plans. They are very much, they are not much having some kind of very in-depth analysis on the influence of land use on transportation and the transportation on land use. Okay, so what we're talking about, that certain land uses will exhibit, or they will give birth to different kind of trips. Let's say if it is a commercial center, commercial land use is there. So a lot of commercial activity will be happening in that area. So that land use, that parcel of a land use, that would invite or attract commercial trips to that area. Okay, so now we are thinking about, okay, this is the commercial type. Maybe if you have, even if there is a level of commercial, like we talk from retail shops to warehouses to commercial centers to plazas. So we have our own hierarchy. If you go through National Reference Manual, you can find hierarchy of commercial land uses. So depending upon those particular land uses, we know how many trips will be attracted by this particular land use. Okay, so if we have enough data, then we can know, okay, these many people will be traveling. Okay, an estimate maybe from that these many people will be coming, especially on the weekends. So a lot of traffic on the weekends. So we need to design a road or capacities or parking spaces according to the land use attraction. Similarly, if it is a residential area and people will be going to the offices, they will be getting out from the house to perform a work trip, and that work trip will put traffic load. So we need to know about existing land uses, where are they located, and how much is the quantity of that land use, and the people and the households, and enough data. So if we have enough data, then we can simulate that how much traffic load will be on the road. So we need to know about that, and that of course will ultimately significantly affect how are we going to be designing a road network, how we are going to be laying out the cities, and how you're laying out or the laying out even land use or the future land use development patterns. We are assuming it, we are planning it, we have put it in our master plan that this sort of land use development will be done in the future. We need to lay down the road network accordingly. So we need to know about that. And similarly, once we know about that this sort of trips are going to be on the road, depending upon the breakup or the characteristic of that trip, purpose of that trip basically. So we need to design our transportation facilities or alternatives accordingly. So if we calculate the proper demand, then we will be able to cater that demand by providing sufficient or adequate supply. So we need to know about this very important things. And now, of course, these transportation facilities will be provided to provide better access to different areas, and that will ultimately affect your land values, and that land values will ultimately affect your land uses. So the better if good accessibility through transportation is provided somewhere, you have increased the land prices. And when you have increased the land prices in a particular area, you have increased the economic potential of that area. So land users will be attracted and that development will be done along that roads. So land use and transportation, they are very much, again, a cyclic process. And another thing that it's very difficult to analyze that, okay, is land use is influencing your transportation, or your transportation is influencing your land use. So they go have a kind of a, I would say, we call it, I'm not remembering the correct word, but it goes both ways. So it's very difficult to ascertain that how much transportation is influencing your land use or how much land use is influencing your transportation. So, but with proper planning, with proper land use planning, and we can go for transportation planning, and that land use planning and transportation planning, once we know what we want and we plan both of them accordingly, side by side together, then that proper transportation systems and land use planning can be done effectively in that area. So any question till now, class? Any question? So What is urban land use? That is accumulation of certain activities like residential, commercial. So accumulation, the spatial accumulation at one point and one area, one parcel, one block. We can have predominantly, okay, this block is a residential area, or this is a zone, commercial or residential zone. Then we can have an estimate, okay, that this certain land uses will give this type of movement, and this type of land use will give this type of movement. So depending upon, for example, the example for commercial land use, we know there will be suppliers and customers, right? Commercial activities. Firstly, the product will need to come. So logistics support logistical transport should be there. How much product is going to be moved from industry and put as a commercial center for sale, and maybe how many people are daily commuting to have to do businesses, for example, then movement of passengers along that customers. So if we know about the commercial land uses, then we will can make some kind of appropriate transportation uh, measures to accommodate that traffic. Now, another way of representing this interaction is that transportation is done to provide better accessibility, right? And that accessibility will have cater a potential that will cause or result in or influence your land use. And that land use will generate some activities, some trips, right? So activity patterns. And those activity patterns then again will influence your transportation system. So it's a kind of a cycle, okay? And that is also influenced by the landscape, the designing, the economic processes involved. What are the demographic? If we have the enough demographic analysis, like data, we would know about different how many trips will be generated, what type of technological changes is happening, and how much public policy is influencing. So these are some other factors which are affecting both of them. But there is again a close association between transportation and land use. So kind of based on that previous figure, uh, we can say that it is a feedback effect which influencing each other. And technology investment, lot of characteristics of transportation is there, like we talked about in the previous lecture, that what influences your transportation. So those are there, and activity patterns are there, and we need to know about the activity patterns to measure how many trips will be generated from a particular area and plan accordingly then. So, but there is which came first issue, that is land use first, should we do land use planning first or should we go for transportation planning first? So you need to balance between them. There is no hard and fast rule that which phenomena is better than the other, which should be planned before other. So if we break down the same cycle into like more classifications or subcategories, like talk about activities will affect the car ownership. Let's talk about from this, that land use will generate some kind of activities, and that's activities will people will use cars. Maybe they'll move. They'll decide where to go. They will choose where how to go, which mode to choose, which road to which route, or which alternate paths are available. So which roads will you be taking to reach the particular destination, and that will ultimately a lot of linkages would be there that will incur travel times and cost, and then accordingly that land use is okay. If we have travel time enough, cost is for us, we will generate a trip, and when we reach there, it will provide accessibility, and once it provides accessibility, it attracts certain trips, and that would give a kind of economic potential for people to invest in particular land uses, and that will result in construction, and people will use that. So built up areas also happening. So it goes hand in hand. So a kind of a feedback retroactive loop is there. So okay, another way to represent relationship. What if we are talking about this was just talking about one simple analysis, but now we have talked about multiple nuclei where a lot of CBDs or markets are present in the city, and a lot of them are uh, spread all over the city, especially in a metropolitan city. So these CBDs need to be connected together as well. production center supply and demand is there. So supplier production from production product will be launched from industry. It will be transported from one area to the CBD or to the market, as well as then there are the residential sector. People will be traveling to the industry to do perform jobs, and there will also be some customers traveling to the commercial center to buy this particular product. So there is a lot of this is a very simple uh, uh, figure which tries to tell you about the linkages, but at, there will be a lot of road networks, a road of pathways, lot of pathways, alternatives, lot of traffic, lot of trip generation. So how many traffic load will be on the road, that needs to be analyzed. And now, of course, once we know about the land uses and we have enough data, then we can easily, to some extent, we can predict that this much traffic will come on daily, this much traffic will come in the evening, this one in the morning, this one this one will be in the on the weekends. So depending on the trip types, we can segregate those as well. So we'll go into this as well in the later in the lectures. Okay, another way to represent about that is that your land uses, they are not rapidly changing. They change, okay, but not rapidly as compared to the population or the employment patterns. So population is a very important factor that will ultimately need that would affect your transportation mode, transportation systems. So that population and the employment generated, those are rapidly changing. But and those are impacting your commuting patterns, and they are very much I would say directly influencing your transportation pattern mobilities. But we, as a transport planner, let's say we will need to accommodate this changing commuting patterns or mobilities, we need to upgrade our transportation network. But upgrading a transportation network is also slow. So the linkages between land use and transportation is strong, but the subcomponents, they are very fast evolving. So if we know about deployment and the population data, then we can easily calculate the influence of different subcategories. But what happens usually is that in case of Pakistan, at least, we don't have enough data of population. We don't have disaggregated data about the population in Pakistan, and so ultimately, we cannot predict. Okay, we are doing it to some extent, but cannot effectively predict what sort of traffic mobility is needed. And according to that, let's say mobility patterns, we don't know what sort of transportation network changes needs to be done to cater the growing or evolving commuting patterns. So that's out there. Another way to represent this land use, let's talk about, if you're talking about, we are going to be measuring it on based on some particular model. So I think, yeah, this is better. So land use is, if you're talking about land use, how land use is formed, it has their own theories. It has its own models, which predicts what sort of land use will it be. Of course, as a GS or a plan or a GS expert or a urban planner, which are spatial planners, which are very much concerned with the land use growth or land cover growth patterns, they can say, okay, this is the pattern, this is will be how it will be grow. But okay, that model is good enough in the computer simulation, but that needs to overlay with the spatial structures and spatial interaction between those land uses. So that has its own models. It has their own theories behind it, how it works. And transportation network, it has its own systems. So different models. So now what is happening is now we need different hybrid models. Then we as a transport planner need to be aware of how land use is changing. We need to know, have a very good grip on the land use models. Then coming to spatial interaction models, we need to know about that how these are interaction models are happening, how people are using different modes, how why they are traveling. We need to know that. Okay. So once we know the spatial interactions, then we can ultimately design our own networks. So that is that transport capacity analysis, transport assignment models, You might have done traffic count survey. So this falls in transportation network. So we need to know about that. So different models are there, and we need to be aware of all these models to come up with the best. I would not say best. I would say relatively best model for us or alternative for us, and that can be used to enhance our transportation network. Now there are different issues depending on the land use and level of spatial accumulation. We can say the concentration, and then we can also include the densities. Like central areas have a lot of people will be accumulated together, and high density would be there. So different type of land uses will be there, and correspondingly different trips will be will generate from over there. And the parentheses will have low densities and ultimately will have lesser number of trips as well. They'll be spread out a lot. And depending upon the spatial locations of different land uses, as different spatial location of different forms, let's say, they will have different types of land uses. So so that will ultimately impact your activity generation as well. Okay. Yeah. So we'll go into much into detail later on. That we'll be talking about in the mobility part. We will be talking about that certain activities like commercial area will generate commercial trips, right? That's the thing. Institutional activities, school will generate some kind of educational trips. Some people will go for healthcare, so medical trips will be there. Ultimately, these are irregular, but still these are there. But in routine activities, let's say education, 5 days, people will be traveling to school or college or university. So these trips will happen 5 days a day. At this, it will have proper time period in which those type of trips will be generated. So our model will cater that, okay, this particular time, this much trips will be generated for this purpose. So we need to accommodate them. So of course, industrial trips, so logistics trips are there. We will not be concerned with that in our course, but those are there as well. Yeah. Yeah. So okay, we have talked about this already. That as a land cover, we've talked about land cover, which we call formal land use. So we know about built up, paved, and other. But actually, what we need is a functional land use, in which we need to know about what are the particular land uses or purpose or functions of land use. So that is really needed to come up with a transportation systems that we know how much it will be generating trips that needs to be accommodated by the transportation systems. So another issue that, like, if some of you are not familiar with the remote sensing, in which you need to the space and satellite imagery is there, and you need to extract what type of band, based on bands, we would know that what sort of built up area is there, what sort of land cover is there, and ultimately for formal land use is easy to I would say uh, in which we what we call it prediction. We can make good prediction modeling for formal land uses as compared to functional land uses, because functional land uses will be very much dependent upon the sensibilities and social interactions and spatial interactions. But formal land use, we call it land cover, that can be easily mapped through GIS layers. So there is a, for example, an example of a map, for land use map. Uh, so this is Fatahjang, and you can know that these are different activities, different patterns. So we know that, let's talk about that. Okay, let's make this as a parcel, one area as a parcel. And then when we know that many people are living in a particular zone, particular region, we can extrapolate, we can guess, make an educated guess based on our models that these many trips will be originated from this region and will be traveling along this route and maybe from one place to another. And this is the land cover, in which we can easily only see that this is the built up area, that is the urban built up area, and this is the green areas, and then maybe but we cannot know about what sort of land uses, that functional land uses are there. So we can make a very good prediction modeling that it has increased tremendously. A lot of green areas is disappearing, and we can have a very good estimate about the built-up area at least. Another way to, okay. Another way is that this is another footprints of land cover. And of course, if the land cover is more, then of course, more land uses is there as well. So there a lot of cities have their own land cover and land use practices. So we need to know about this growing land cover as well to accommodate that what sort of land uses might be happening in that area, and we need to provide alternatives, transportation alternatives accordingly. So another way to like managing, like we're talking about land expansion, everything. So that models, depending upon, there are a lot of models out there. If a GS person can help me out, like they are Markov chain modeling. There are a lot of methods to predict how land change is happening. But as a planner, we need to know there are different types of land urban roads. So infill development, linear development, sprawling, like this. So these are types of urban growth. And there's also influenced by the zoning. Our zoning systems, like that is very important for us as a planner to manage land use growth. So land use is effectively tackled by the zoning types. So there are zoning types: commercial functional zoning, like land uses, commercial activity, residential. We can go for form based. We can divide it based on the densities as well, and maybe incentivizing some type of thing. So zoning is effectively done to tackle the land use change, to restrict land use change. Okay. So if we are restricting land use change and there is no change in land use, then we can have a very good transportation system which can support our static land use. So we'll go into this model in the coming lecture, but just as give you an idea or an introduction about how it will be linked to your transportation system. So we need to designate, we call it regions, some people call it zones. So depending upon whatever you say, the regions, we can have an idea that what sort of predominant land use is there in a particular zone, and how that zone, how that land use is interacting with another zone. So I need to know how many people will be traveling from, let's say, this centroid to another centroid. Okay, so another region, from one region to another, how many people will be traveling, and then accordingly, I need to know what is the existing transportation network is there. Then I can tell you that how many people will be using this type of road network to reach from this place to this place. So everything is interconnected. So land use play a very vital role in connecting, in predicting what sort of activity is there. That activity will then tell us about how many trips will be generated. And once we know about the number of trips being generated at a particular time, at a particular place, then I can know about how much traffic load will be on this particular road. So these go very much side by side. So this was about an introduction about transportation and land use system. So class, any question, please feel free to ask. Our first section of the presentation is finished. Anyone? No question, everything clear? Yes, Rubas, please.
सर ये जो measuring of transportation in the land use system, सर इसकी समझ नहीं आई कि मतलब ये जो आप डिस्कस कर रहे थे, दोबारा बता सकते हैं?
Okay, so I was talking about that if we have a certain, let's say this is city. Okay, so we divide that city. Okay, we can divide it based on some along some particular roads, maybe along some natural features, maybe planned area, non-planned area maybe. Okay, so we have made some kind of regions or zones. Let's talk about zone. I'll use the word zone. So we have made the zone. Let's say I1. Okay, so I1, I know that there is a particular land used in I1. So I will know that, okay, I1 is a commercial, let's say CBD. It's a CBD. I1 is a CBD. Okay, CBD is a commercial area. So commercial area will attract production. Let's say this I6. I6 has a lot of industries. So I6, or we note that now traffic will be moved from I6 to I1 or I1 to I6. We need to know that. Okay, so we can calculate how much traffic load is there and what sort of transportation networks is there. So once we overlay that transportation networks and overlay with that need or that I would say traffic load, then I can evenly distribute along the road networks, and then I can know about that this is a particular road network. Is it enough to handle this traffic or not? And if it is not, then okay, I need to upgrade my transportation network. If not, then I'll stay with it. So that's it. But of course, when we are going into this transportation modeling in the coming lectures, you'll get a more clear idea. This is a very crude or basic model, basic, to give you a basic idea that how transportation land use is influencing. You just need to know about the theory right now. We'll go into the model in the later in the lectures. Any other question, please? Is everything clear or nothing is clear?
So it's clear so far.
सर एक्चुअली जो अर्बन एरियाज के अंदर हमारे ट्रैफिक लोड कैलकुलेशन है, हम उसको किस तरह करेंगे जब लैंड यूज प्लान कर रहे होंगे?
Okay, very good question, Saifullah. We'll do that calculations in the later half of the lectures. That is the next portion of our analysis of our, what would you say, course. We'll go into it later. Yes.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So okay, I'll stop the recording now.